everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Camilla.
And we are afraid for our lives.
No.
Every day.
Nope.
This is
I'm
Terrorscape.
happily hunting.
This is a game in which one player is going to be a hunter, a killer, a murderer, and everyone else is trapped in a house that you can't get out of, that you showed up because it was raining or whatever.
They all have a little backstory.
They do,
right?
actually.
Yeah, it's really funny.
For why they came to the house. And you got to survive. So let's take a look at it. When you play this game, you're playing in an area. In the opening game, in the base game, you just have this mansion. And you and two other people, there's always three people, so you can have one person controlling all three of them, or three different people are running away from the murderer, or whoever it is. There's three that are included in the base box: the murderer, the ghost, and the guy with the chainsaw, the butcher. And so you have this. There's also this big giant house that's set up here in the middle of the table. And this house is here because the bad guy, the killer, has the exact same board. They have their character on the board. They have little tokens that they can use to guess where the people are at any point in time. They have cards that show them the special people's abilities. Up here on the top is some tokens. We're going to keep track of characters. If you get wounded again, you die and the players lose. And this keeps track of fear. If you get too much fear, you will make some noise. That's not all that's here. This has a dice tower built into this. Drop some dice. They come out here in the bottom. And some more. Let's talk about the game. In this game, the three good characters, for some reason, have shown up. The door is locked behind them. They need to get out. They know where the bad guy is at the beginning of the game, and they are trying to win in one of two different ways. One, they can find 5 keys. So is a specific deck here for finding keys, and there's also a search deck that might have a key or two in it. There are 3 different rooms on the board that show keys. When you're in those, you'll be able to search for keys. Another thing you can do is you can go here in the living room and work on repairing the radio. And once the radio is fully repaired, then you simply have to survive for 5 turns until the police show up. So those are the 2 ways that the good guys can win. The killer can win by killing off one of the good guys. So the good guys on their turn, it's just going to go back and forth. They can secretly, everyone here gets one action. One action that you can do can be moving 1 or 2 spaces. You'll see there's different spots on the board, although the killer and sometimes even the survivors have a chance to board them up. You can try to repair the radio if you're in the radio room. You can, if you're in one of the rooms with a key, search the deck and hope you find one of these keys. Now, whenever you search the deck or whenever you do anything finding items, you will make noise, and you'll put noise here. At the end of a player's turn, they will tell the killer where noise has occurred. Now, you have items and things that you can find. There's all sorts of items in this deck, and sometimes they help you fight against the killer, but sometimes they let you make fake noise so that the killer thinks you're in a room that you're not. They also, if they have certain items, can go from a secret passage. So here's a secret passage from the living room here to the graveyard. There's also another secret passage from the banquet hall to the garden. And so the players are running around. They're going to be taking one action. After all the players have taken one action, one player will draw 2 items from the item deck, keep one, discard the other. But it doesn't matter. If either one of them shows sound, they're going to have to make sound in the room they currently are in. The murderer is going to play a little bit different. At the end of his turn, the survivors will tell him if there is noise in different spots, and then the murderer is going to decide what they're going to do. The killer has a deck of cards that corresponds to their character. So this character is called the murderer. So they have this deck. You'll start with 2 cards. And at the beginning of your turn, you can play any cards that show these lightning bolt. So this one, for example, that's the murderer move one. This one here has a cost. I have to discard another card from my hand, but causes all the survivors to get 1 fear. Remember, if survivors have too much fear, they'll make noise. And so after you've played any of those cards you want, the murderer has 2 actions. They can move 1 or 2, or they can move and search a room that they're in. And they say, I'm searching in, for example, the shed. And if any of the survivors are there, they have to say, I'm there. And then the murderer will try to stab them or kill them in some way or fashion. Some of the characters might also have a card like this whizzing by. This is the card that the Spectre has, where you play this card instead of doing your 2 actions. This one lets you move 1 to 4 and give a fear to anybody who's in that line. Sometimes they can do something called sense, where you will look at an area on the board, and the good guys have to tell you, like this says, sense a color zone. I can say I'm sensing in the red area. And then the survivors just have to tell me if anybody is in that spot. Now, the whole point of this is for the murderer to find these people. So if you say, hey, I'm searching this room and someone's there, at that point you'll fight them. When the killer is trying to take someone out, you're going to look at the killer's strength. So I'm talking about the murderer right now. His strength is 4. Sometimes the murderer, every time he goes through his deck, will go up a level, which will give them special things that they can do. But whenever the murderer attacks somebody, then they're going to roll dice. These dice show 0s, 1s, and 3s on them. Normally they'll roll 4 dice, but they'll roll 1 less for each fear they have. But they might have a bonus based on any items that they show. So here they have 2, the murderer is 4. They're going to take a wound. Remember, if you're already wounded and you take another wound, the survivors lose. Although the survivors do have items and things that can heal them. And that's basically it here, folks. There's a lot more going on. There's some rules about surviving. Each of the different bad guys, so here we have the murderer, gets special abilities as they go up in levels. One of them will usually give them a pretty awesome card that they'll be able to stick in their deck and use. This one just lets him come out and kill anyone who's within 2 spaces of him. And you're going to keep going. The gameplay is not particularly long. It's about 45 minutes. There are other things that you can do. There are, cards that you can give to both the survivors and the murderer if one person's having a hard time winning. There is a survival guide that not only shows the 3 murderers here, the butcher, the murderer, and the specter, but also shows all the ones that come in expansions like werewolf, huntress, strangler, unidentified, statues, and then it also shows you all different cards here. And all these murderers and other boards that you can play with are plug and play and will fit right in. I think it's safe to say that this is one of the most thematic games I've ever played.
It really is.
I mean, this game definitely puts theme over mechanisms, and I'm not even saying that in a bad way. It's just that it's really well done in that regard.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the theme and the idea came first, and then the mechanisms were made to match the theme. And like you said, I think that's done very well. That's done very well. I don't think that the mechanisms don't fit or don't make sense. I definitely would. I wouldn't call it clunky even, but you can tell the theme is where it's at. They each have, like we were saying, the backstories where they're interwoven together, and you see their actual character powers going into the way they move and what they can do on the board and how they can interact with the killer. You definitely feel like you're in it without it being having like a soundtrack and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I really like Mansions of Madness, for example, and you get the creepy noises. Even without that, this feels just as thematic as a game such as Mansions of Madness to me.
See, I disagree. I, unlike you guys, think that this is a very thematic game. I don't have a disagreement. No, it's
I just wanted to be a contrarian.
I did.
How'd that go?
Now, so I want to talk about the components real briefly. That mansion looks gigantic, and it is. Although I will say it's not particularly hard to put together and take apart, which makes me happy because usually these things are.
That was my huge concern, that, and like, oh, is this going to be a big, bloated, overproduced thing? And this is me saying this? It's not.
Yeah.
It also works really well. I get so annoyed in games that have tiny shields that you can't, I'm like, okay, Camille, I'm not going to look at your stuff in front of you because your shield's so small. You cannot, I am tall. And I cannot see over it. Me and Chris, were you there? I was trying to. I have to almost stand up completely to see over the board. Like I can't accidentally see the other side of the board. And you can't see around it either because it's really wide. It just works so well.
Yeah.
Well, and there's those trays that are meant to be on the side, and I think those will kind of block the vision a little bit as well, which I ended up not playing with them and not need them. But that is another added measure if you do have that concern.
Because you're sitting up to 3 people on one single side of the table. You don't want to look around. You don't want to accidentally be like, oh, sorry, guys, killer's in beef suit. You know what I mean? But, like, it works really well. I was concerned with the assembly of it. You showed me how quick it is. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm convinced. I think that this production is excellent.
A real big concern of mine, just in light of recent games and also just seeing this production, is the table space and the hog that it could be, because you see this massive middle structure you have to build, and there's 2 different boards, and then your individual player boards.
You
But
do
at the
need
end of the
a
day,
wide table.
that's it. Yes, you need the wide table. But even the player boards, I mean, they end up being about this big, maybe 6 inches by 6 inches, and that's it. And so you can put them, you talked about how you couldn't see around. Yeah, we set 3 on one side of the table, but we could put all those boards pretty close together.
And and if table space is a concern, you don't need that extra part of your character board. That's just the 3 slots to put cards. Just put cards around on your board, right?
Or hold them in your hand. It's 3 cards. You'll never have more, well, unless you're the one character, you'll never have more than 3 cards.
Yeah.
So at max, if you're playing, what's his face, you'll have 6.
And you know what? I mean, really, there's not a lot of stuff going on in the game. There's not that many pieces. You need some noise tokens. There's occasional an extra token or something, but it's very minor. Now, on the negative side of components, I gotta say, first of all, I love the fact that they have 3 rule books, a regular rule book, one for the survivors, one for the murderer. The rules are not as clear as they could be. There's a lot of, it's probably translation issues, but it's not translation issues. They left out a huge section on how communication works. We assumed, and we got it clarified with the publisher, that the survivors don't have to tell the murderer pretty much anything except where noise tokens are. But that is not bolded in the book, and it should be. Like, what can you say? And even then, I still wonder with each of the new murderers, that I keep calling them murderers, the killers, because there's one called the murderer, that's a little confusing. Each of the killers, some of them will say there's traps or this and that, and I'm like, okay, so how does that work in the communication scheme? I really need to know that. So we played basically where there's like 0 communication, except for things that you need to know. Here I put up a blocking thing. Well, the rulebook's clear, tell that. Here there's noise, tell that. Other than that, we haven't. In fact, in the last game we played, I put earphones in when they were playing, and I listened to music so that I wouldn't accidentally hear anything. And that works really well.
I thought you would put on like spooky music, but I heard a little of the bleed. It was like sunshine and lollipop.
No, I was playing Christmas music. Hey, I'm the murderer. I don't care.
I don't play by your rules.
So I wish that's a big issue, and I think they need to get an FAQ out on that.
I really think that this is one that's begging for their errata, and it will get it pretty quickly, unfortunately. I think, well, fortunately it'll get it. Unfortunately, it has to have one. I think, for me, I love the 3 different rule books, because then if you are the survivor and you need to look something up, you just pull yours, and it's kind of tailored to probably the question that you have, as well as you both can individually be looking up your stuff. Maybe they don't see what page you go to. It still kind of just helps kind of share that around the table. But what I found was there's some things that are clarified in one of those books, either the survivors or the killer, and are not in the main rule book. I feel like
that's weird.
I feel like
weird.
those 2 rule books should come together to make the main rule book, which has everything. And the fact that was like, I mean, there was one item specifically that we didn't know what to do with, one of the key cards. We're like, where does this go? Oh, we had to go all the way to survivors to figure it out. How does it work? Why is it there? But that step didn't need to happen.
Yes, you would assume that if there's certain setup things that aren't to be found, it would be in like the survivor-specific rule book, but it's missing from the main one. So that needs work.
Yes.
It really does.
Yeah.
They're not lying about the time. It says 30 to 45 minutes. That's 100%
Quick.
correct. It's a quick game. And most games where there's one versus many, the one has a much cooler time of it. They're doing stuff. And sometimes they play as much as everybody else combined. And I've always disliked that part. Here it's much more even. In fact, sometimes as the bad guy, you're like, I do this, my turn's done. And then the good guys are like, hang on, we're frozen in fear. What are we going to do next?
Yeah.
And so I have a huge problem with the fact that they tell you to use the chainsaw, the butcher first. The chainsaw, I guess it's chainsaw, yeah. The butcher first, because he is easily, of the 3 in here, and then the other 6 more, five more expansion guys, he's easily the most boring. I think he's boring for everyone involved. Even for the good guys, you're just like, here he comes, run, here he comes, run. You can win with him, but it's almost just due to blind luck. I just happen to search the room that people are in. And I've tried him multiple times. You can go online and watch our first game, but then I was like, I'm going to win with this guy. And just since the good guys know where you are at all times, it's hard. You play the murderer. Suddenly, the game is, you disappear, and the good guys are like, where did he go?
Yeah.
I like that. There's still parameters,
Yes.
Like where you can go, we can make sure I'm not near him for sure, but then we might not get done what we want to get done.
So I don't have as big a problem with him because I think I view him as that first time into the game. He's very simple mechanically, which helps ease that. But more so, this game gets better as everybody knows how to play. It really benefits from the killer knowing what, not just what the player powers are, but what is in that deck. So you can't
There is
always.
a book that shows the deck completely.
There is, but again, if you're referencing that the whole time, until you've played against it, you really don't understand that feel of the game. And so I think playing with the butcher, the chainsaw, whatever he's called, really helps ease that and gets you to that second play that is going to be more interesting because now sometimes they can mitigate it and they can move further. Sometimes they can throw a whiskey bottle and cause a noise somewhere else. Until you know that, the game really doesn't come to life.
I'm just saying I don't think it feels as fair for the butcher. Maybe you can win with him. I found that to be not fun to play with him. Even once I knew everything, I'm still just wildly guessing where they are. All the butcher does is run around like,
But again, I don't think you play it to win. I think you play that one to learn the game and learn the different decks so that you can move on to a more balanced game.
Maybe it's hard because we say this a decent amount of that. Games should be fun out the gate, and it depends what your expectation is going into being the role of the hunter, of the one person trying to kill the other people. I think that the chainsaw guy is very atmospheric. One of his actions is rev up the chainsaw. Everyone in his space adjacent to him gets a fear token. Like that's it. It almost feels like if you're playing that role, then you are kind of being the game master. You're almost running it like a D&D campaign for everybody else, because it's much more restrictive. It's much more obvious what's happening, and so if you don't feel like you can win that easily, being that guy. Go into that with that expectation, or just play one of the other characters first. But I absolutely agree with your point that this is a game that warrants repeat plays. Your first play will probably be a mess when you have to sit there and go, I need to ask you a clarifying question about what you did in B5. I'm not in that space.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to note that even after that first play where we did play the chainsaw, it stayed on the mind. So was it fun necessarily? It wasn't the greatest, and you can recognize that. It's like, it was kind of a boring character, it was clunky, it was this, but the game stayed on our mind and wanted to have us go back. And I think that's a different kind of fun. It's not like, wow, that was great and so much tense. You have to get there, and I think he is an entry point to that because it did stay on your mind.
It did. I'm still going to say, play the murderer first, and then play the phantom second, and then get the expansions. But don't go back. I'm not playing them again. I'm just not going to. But she's right about that. We played this. I lost terribly, and I thought about it all night. I took it home, played it some more, and played some more. I think the theme of it works so well that I like this theme a lot. I hate horror movies actually, but I like the theme of this in a game, and this game allows me to have that theme without very clunky mechanisms. Once you play it, it's really smooth and so quick. I'm tired of playing games the main reason I don't play Mansion of Madness more is that it takes 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes.
And it's such a setup.
Right.
Like all the tokens, all
I can
the
get this set
all
up
that.
pretty quickly now. It doesn't look like it from the video. You'll be like, that's a lot of setup. It's not. Yeah. It's really quick. So I struggled on my rating on this one. I'm bouncing all over the place on it because I want to go real high. Then I was like, I don't like this. I don't. At the end of the day, I'm going to give it an 8.5. It's close for me. It was close, but I really love this, and it does horror better than any game I've played in years. I think this is the best horror-themed game I've played in a long time. We just played Halloween. That was very thematic.
Very mass market thematic.
Right.
Right. This is much more, you can sink your teeth into it a little bit more thematic.
Yeah, but also, again, like I said, the overhead isn't, it looks huge, the box and everything, but it doesn't feel that bad. So that's where I'm at.
I'm going to go ahead and give this one an 8, which is fairly high for me for a hidden movement game. I think the twist of this one, allowing both characters to be hidden, that's great. I think that the way that the game is produced and manufactured allows you to have, 2 miniatures for whichever bad guy. The bad guy can disappear. One side knows information, the other side doesn't, but also vice versa. That's a good hook to get me interested into a hidden movement game, because it's not usually my favorite genre. But this one also, the playtime. that has a huge amount of praise. It should get a huge amount of praise because the last time we played, right, Camilla and I were on a team, and we were discussing quite a bit and just, trying to make sure, okay, let's not mess up little things here and there. And Tom was like, you guys are taking a bit longer on your turns. And we were, to be fair. And we still finished in 45 minutes.
Yeah, I thought we had played for like 2 hours.
That was also us like relearning the game pretty much because we hadn't played for like
it for a bit.
Yeah, for
I
like
had
2
to keep
weeks or
being
something like that. I was like, hold on, wait.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, hypothetically again, B5, what happens?
Right. So that's a lot. The rule book, though, really needs to be addressed. Once there's an errata out there, good. You should refer to that. But it's a disappointment because you shouldn't have to.
Yeah. I'm coming in right there with you guys, a little bit higher. I'm going to come in at a 9.
Wow.
Most of that doc is because of the rule book. This is something that I will look for that errata, probably print out some different things. I do think the game does a great job with the player aids, though. I love that you have a player aid that's survivor on one side. What can the killer do? Turn it over and figure it out. And again, it's just a tile. For a game looking and feeling so thematic, it's not the table hog that I was expecting. I think it also plays really well at all the player counts. So if I'm looking for that Halloween night and I have, a 2-player game, I think that plays really, really well. The characters are simple to do, and it's more about how they come together, which, again, sells that theme. How do we work together to accomplish one of these 2 goals? I love that there's 2 different ways to win. So part of your strategy also as the survivors is maybe trying to trick the killer and have him think you're going for both, but he doesn't really know what you're going for. He's guessing how much radio signal do you have. He's guessing which exit are you going to go to. Did you get that one item? Did you keep that one item?
Yeah, I went to the wrong exit last time.
You did.
So
and
annoying.
It cost you the game.
We threw a whiskey bottle at the radio. We weren't trying to repair it. We're just trying to make you think we were.
We kept throwing noise at it. Meanwhile, we're running around and getting all these keys, I mean, it's just, there's stories that come out of it. On 4, the cooperation and the talking, it's just really, feels like a social deduction game. And I love that. So what do we think he's going to do? What about this? If I was him, I'd go here. But what if he thinks I'm going there? And as the killer, you're just having a great time trying to figure out what's going on and chase them down. So for me, it's a 9. The theme really sells it, but also the player count, the time, not a huge table hog, just like all those things that usually bother me about these games. I feel like this streamlines it very, very well.
One small note I will say is that I think in terms of replayability, I think there's a decent amount of stuff in here. But if you enjoy this, I anticipate you're going to say, I want expansions. This is one of the times that I think good that this came with expansions out the gate because the expansions are just more characters, more killers and stuff. I think this is one of the few times I'll say, good on that.
There's also there's some, you haven't seen them, but there's cards you can give both people, give the survivor some extra powers, but then also the murderer gets some extra powers.
Oh, cool.
And there's also even side objectives that you can give the survivors to try to do. There's even one where they can build a bazooka. If they do, they win the game immediately.
I'll be right back. I'm going to go build a bazooka.
Why was I not given this option?
Because that's all extra stuff. But it's all in there. There's even a method, and I don't want to play this way. There's even a method where the survivors can it's last man standing type thing. I'm not interested in that, but it is in the box if you want to play it.
Is the bazooka in the base box?
Yes.
Or is that
We could have done a bazooka.
All right.
I'm not ready to review this. Hold on.
Anyway.
From the top.
So that's Terrorscape. Check it out. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Camilla.
I'm going to get you.